Hi, gang, and welcome back to tomorrow's Best Practices Today. Today, we're super happy to have with us Kathleen Schaub, and she's recently written this great book, Marketing in the Great Big Messy Real World, which we all have to live in. She is sharing years of experience in this book. She's currently a contributor to CMS Wire and Martech, but she spent almost 9 years at IDC as VP of the CMO Advisory and Customer Experience Practice. So she has lived through the turbulence and is back to report on it, so you don't have to. Welcome, Kathleen, to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me, Clark. Looking forward to the conversation.
It's going to be great. And I want to kick things right off because one of the first things, it's the introduction of your book. You say marketing is not a vending machine. And I know many listeners can kind of feel the frustration living in the bones of that. But tell us how did that phrase come to you, and what do you mean when you say that?
Well, I've been using that phrase, marketing is not a vending machine, in a couple different variations for probably about a decade. It just kind of happened in a conversation with a client one time, and it just resonated so much, and it's resonated with so many people that I've talked to. So I've really stuck with it. I mean, if you think about the way that a vending machine works, it's probably the most deterministic thing that you can think of. I mean, you put your money in, you press a button, and boom, here out comes your wonderful candy bar or whatever. And, I think that companies would just love to have their marketing work even a little bit like that, right? You put in your marketing budget and you do whatever campaigns or sales things that you're doing, and boom, out pops your revenue in your pipeline.
If only,
If only.
right?
That's right. And there's an amazing amount of effort and money that goes into trying to make marketing into some semblance of a vending machine. But we all know that marketing is not a vending machine, and its marketing is about people. And people are about as far from a vending machine as you can get. And scientists now call the interactions with people in markets and economies, except they call them complex systems. And they are a little bit crazy, right? They're what I call VUCA. I got that an acronym from the U.S. Army War College, but it's been spread around in a lot of different places. Stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, and that's marketing, right? That's marketing.
Yeah, the front part of the book is very much about moving from this deterministic idea we have had, I guess, about marketing, because we got the tools, right? We were able to start measuring all these things, 20 years ago or whatever, and create a funnel and a model with conversion rates and all that stuff. Got very deterministic about it, focused on return on marketing and what we could bring back and say, you give me $1. It's the classic thing that a board or a CEO will say, if I give you one more dollar, what do I get for it?
Right.
You
ROI.
talk ROI above all, particularly in this economy, right? But you talk very eloquently, I think, about the transition to this, from this deterministic to the complex framing system, and how your mindsets. I'd say that on purpose. You talk about multiple mindsets that need to shift because of these changes. I'd love for you to take our listeners through that.
Yeah. So the mindset versus mindsets is actually a valid distinction, because there is kind of one Uber mindset, if you will, which is moving from, as you put it, the deterministic kind of mechanistic view to this view that marketing is complex. And therefore, there is an urgency to accept that and to start uh, moving forward in a new way, because you'll just get a lot more benefits. And so the four mindset changes that I outline in my book are related to the ones that I have found specifically around different marketing strategic management. So we've got how you think about budget, how you think about um, your planning and measurement? I mean, we do a lot of planning and measurement, but is there a better way to do it given that how complex marketing is? How the decision making and then people management. And so, what I propose in the book, or what I've discovered in the book, is this uh, way to stop thinking about the mechanistic way. So, for example, the first one, budget. The mind shift is to think like an investor. So, a common way of thinking about budget is more from an accounting point of view, where marketing is a cost. Now, it's true that FASB says, oh, marketing has to appear as a cost. Yes, but that's where the commonality has to end, because you don't want to think about marketing as being revenue taking. You want to think about marketing as revenue making. And you think about your 401 or the way venture capitalists work. Marketing delivers almost all of its value in the future. So you want to risk your funds for what you believe to be greater for future value. So, like, that's the first mindset. The next mindset then has to do with planning and measurement. And here, I love this one, and everyone kind of navigates towards this. I use that in my title too. Why rewire your marketing organization to navigate anything? Because if you think about even just driving, I mean, there's a lot of different kinds of navigation, right? Sailing, pilots, et cetera. But just think about driving. You have a constantly changing world around you. You can't, yes, you have a GPS, and that's what data becomes, is like your GPS. And you know where you want to go, but how you get there and what time you're going to get there, it depends. I mean, I drove up to Marin County on Saturday, and I got there in time and everything was wonderful, but there are people who didn't, right? There are people who got in traffic jams, or hopefully not something worse. And that's how the world of marketing always works as well. So you want to move away from this, plan once and then, put all your metrics against some static plan,
Yeah.
and adopt practices that will help you move with the changing context, changing VUCA situation. The third one, which has to do with decision making, is think like a statistician. And I mean, some people may freak out about that because, I mean, I personally really liked probability and statistics when I was in school, but a lot of people don't. And our brains don't naturally think in probabilities. We love that cause and effect, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's that being in love with the vending machine. And it's a little sad to have to give that up, but the reality is you have to stop seeking certainty. You have to stop asking questions like, if I give you this dollar, what am I going to get back? Those are vending machine questions. And instead, accept the fact that no matter what you do in a complex world, you're going to have only a probability of success. And so there are ways of planning and measurement that will help you to deal with that a little bit better. And then the final mind shift has to do with people management. And like, I've worked with literally hundreds of marketing managers over the years, and most of them are really good managers. So this one's a little bit different. It's not completely a shift, but we focused in management mostly on the individual. And what we learn from thinking about complexity is that people's performance, our own performance too, happens at the intersection of what we personally do and who we personally are and what the context is. So this is a guidance towards marketing leaders to start focusing more on creating an ecosystem. So it's think like an ecologist, creating an ecosystem for their team that will bring out their best performance. So those are the 4 mindsets.
That's great. I want to dig into a couple of the mindsets specifically because our audience, they're folks that are in the trenches or leading teams, and you make some really kind of provocative and interesting points. But let's talk about thinking like a navigator first, and the planning, right? Because we think about most organizations have a particular rhythm to their planning. We're getting, I think, better and more flexible about it, but there is a budget cycle. There are quarterly reviews, monthly reviews, there are dashboards, etc. Where do you see the habits that need to be, reviewed or broken or modified, or the new opportunities in having a navigator mindset versus sort of that central planning mindset? Can you maybe give a couple of examples of engagements or advice? What advice do you give when you're talking about being a navigator?
Sure. Well, there's there's a couple things I'd like to reflect on that. One is that yes, you're going to probably always have some sort of a cadence to the way that you do things. That's normal, and that's not a bad thing. But what you do need to do is unlock the the cadence of everything that happens in the business to that annual plan. So there are certain things that have to be done annually. All the financial stuff, that's a legal issue, quarterly, et cetera. But what's happening at the edge? What's happening in the field? What's happening wherever marketing, sales, customer service meets customers? That is very much more chaotic and should not be as centrally driven as it is. So that doesn't mean, woohoo, let everybody do whatever they want. But it has to do with a different relationship and a little bit more flexibility, maybe a lot more flexibility to what's happening in those much more fast paced and highly more volatile places like at the edge. I adopted a term from the design community called wayfinding. There's some similarity to like agile, some of the agile stuff, and it
Mm-hmm.
has to do with how you incrementally learn as you go along. And you want to do the same thing with your planning. You take the step, you see what happens, you learn from it, and then you adapt. And you want to do the same thing with your planning. You might want to do it faster at the edge because
Yeah.
things are changing more quickly. I mean, campaigns may need to change daily, and we have the capability in some cases to be able to do that. But then there's other pieces of the plan, like your strategic mission or the way that you're going to manage your organization. You don't want to change that quickly. Those things change, but they don't have to change at the same pace. So nothing stays static, but it also doesn't all have to be locked into this annual pace. And then, like the GPS, like the driving, as you move forward, you're going to have to be a little more flexible on your metrics. So there may be ranges that you're setting up. Um, it, it, Baseball is a good example. Um, Baseball players would love to have a very high, what is it, 0.300 or something like that. I can't remember what I even wrote in the book. But you want to have that as a guide, but you have to
Your
know that
batting
in
average.
certain
Yeah.
seasons. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
what?
Your batting average. Right. Yeah.
Your batting average. Thank you. You want to have a batting average that's a good batting average, but that in different seasons it's going to go up or down. Obviously the good people have it generally better than those that are not as talented, but you have to be flexible in the way that you handle your manager in your metrics. You have to be flexible in the way you handle your metrics.
Yeah. Which flows into the thinking like a statistician, obviously. And so that was the other question I had about that mindset is because I love the probabilistic approach to things. But at the end of the day, you're going to need to report. You have to be reporting on your progress. You have to be giving numbers to the management and the board. How do how does reporting? You said, well, you need to think in terms of ranges, things like that. How in practice do you advise folks to present that way, to report on their progress, and to work with their management on that mindset?
Well, I think that there needs to be some degree of um, collaboration
Mm-hmm.
on the reporting structure on any of this. I think that while it's very possible for marketing leaders their to take a lot of this stuff forward on their own within the context of their current jobs, I think the numbers are a collaboration, not only in collaboration in the sense of working with sales and other groups in the company to have one single dashboard to report to, but also to have an understanding of what the management is trying to accomplish with those metrics, and have an understanding of what's needed and what's not. So I think that the metrics should be informing a dialogue. They are not the end product, nor should they be. I mean, in my book, I talk about this concept of surrogation, where one set of metrics becomes a surrogate for the complexity of everything that's going on. That's really not a good practice, but it's something that we kind of fall into. Particularly, there's a lot of focus on the very near term kinds of performance metrics, when in actuality, marketing plays out over a much longer period of time, and there's a lot more complexity to what, you have to think about the entire journey and present metrics that move and are reporting on as much as you can all of that journey, and then let it start a dialogue about what is needed and what is not needed. Where do we need to change? Where does this indicate a normal variation in the process, and where does it make us aware that there's an issue that needs to be changed? And again, that's a dialogue, and it's maybe not given as much attention. I mean, I've been in marketing, prior to joining IDC, I was in marketing for many years. And I do recognize that sometimes marketing gets the short shift when it comes to the executive discussion. And I think marketing is getting more important. The more digital that we become, the more important marketing becomes. And companies have to stop thinking about marketing as being fluff or optional and look at it as strategic. And then I think those metrics make a lot more sense, and that conversation becomes more urgent and impactful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the metrics are they're often they're the core topic of communication between the your C level peers or management, and certainly the board. Just give us, they kind of like they want to be in vending machine mode sometime, right? They want to think about their budget, and if they make changes, what they'll get for it. They want to think about the pipeline and how much coverage they have, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the metrics are obviously, they tend to be the core language between marketing a lot of times, but it is a much broader conversation as well. We kind of came into this part of the conversation on metrics, but just in conversation with the C level and the board overall, how do you get buy-in for this, more probabilistic approach, but also, some of the other things that you talk about, that it's less deterministic, that you're going to need to, there's going to be constant change that may change funding, that may change staffing, the shape of the organization that you make. What's the best place to start from, or what are the best kind of legs to make sure you're putting on your argument or your discussion with upper management around this shift?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because, as I mentioned before, although there are a lot of things in the book that marketing can do on their own, marketing leaders can do within their own organizational team, you really get more power from making this shift if you involve more people in the company. And buy-in, just like marketing is not a vending machine, buy-in is not going to be a vending machine either, right? I mean, I think if marketing leaders have an expectation that they're going to, go in, make some sort of a presentation about, whatever, even if it's my book, they're not going to all of a sudden, everybody go, oh, hallelujah, you have the great answer, we're gonna go forward here. Let me change everything too.
If they think that way, they haven't been doing it very long.
No, but I think that and I've made this mistake myself, in many years, is that sometimes if you're the one who knows things ahead of other people, there can be, and again, I will just say I've made this mistake. Um, there can be a little bit of "I told you so," or a little bit of um, I don't know, just sort of a little arrogance, maybe, in the fact that you know something that other people don't. But I mean, your senior leadership is not stupid. They're aware of these things, and I'm not seeing a lot of pushback in the general idea that marketing is complex and not a vending machine. I think the buy-in is a journey, just like the customer journey. You have to have people aware, and you have to have people understand it well enough to have an opinion on it, and then you have to have people persuaded to start committing changes in either behavior or resources or whatever. I mean, the good news is who knows more about commitment journeys than marketing? So I think there's a way to apply what we know about journeys and how to move people forward. Again, I don't think we're going to get a lot of pushback on the idea that marketing is complex. And maybe, I'll offer my book as a way forward too. Maybe there will be actually some relief, because marketing has a lot of persistent problems, and there's a lot of persistent battles between sales and marketing and CFOs. I've had CFOs in situations where I've made some of these comments, and they're like, "Oh my God, no one's ever told me that before," and be relieved to know that there is a reason for all this. It's not just that you have crappy CMOs or belligerent CFOs or whatever, but there's this mismatch between the way we manage business and the way that marketing really um, is causing this problem. I think where the challenge is going to be is in, well, what does that mean? Because boy, giving up that vending machine, not being able to ask those questions and expecting to get answers, that is going to be hard. And it's going to be harder for some organizations than others. Some will be like super excited and move forward. In fact, they're probably already moving forward on some stuff, agile marketing or marketing mix modeling, or, if they're really advanced, causal AI, which has some awesome contributions to make. And others are going to be like, that's so hard. I don't know how I'm going to do that. But again, hopefully my
or
book offers lots of different ways to start.
right, or even just that's so different, right? It's like, okay, I hear what you're saying, but I can't. Like, none of my sockets take that plug. Like, I don't know how to make all this connect. I don't know
Yeah.
I wouldn't know how to measure that. I wouldn't know how to, explain that to the rest of my team. And so, yeah, and I think the book gives some good starting points and good examples for folks, because it's a little bit like, have you heard the good news, right? There's a little bit of conversion, right? That is going to be, there's a lot of, I don't know how deeply they're held, but they've been held for a long time, beliefs around measurement of marketing investment, around the relative value, pardon me, and like you say, the cost center versus the profit center role of marketing in the organization. So it's, I think notionally, I can see how people would be like, yeah, that makes sense. And then getting that into practice is what the book's so good about talking about.
Yeah, and that was the reason why I wrote the book. I mean, I told you that I mentioned that I've been using this concept of, marketing is not a vending machine for quite some time. In the book, I kind of talk about my journey to that understanding. But I realized, and when I left IDC, I was really thinking about like, okay, well, that's not good enough, because it does leave that gap, right? It's like, to your point, it's like, well, then what? It's like standing on the edge of a cliff. And what I was excited and happy to discover, and I suspected it, but was that there actually is a lot of stuff out there. I mean, there's a lot of worlds that deal with this complexity on a daily basis. I mean, I told you VUCA came out of the military, and the military
Yeah.
theaters, healthcare, um, anything having to do with the physical world, even just the driving, but also ecosystems and there's just so many different places that deal with complexity on a daily basis. And what I did was learn from those folks. And there's actually some good books out there on general management. I just
Yeah.
didn't find any for marketing. So I wrote the book that I wanted to read. I wanted those answers. And I was excited to find out that there actually are a lot of things that people can do. They're never going to go to get, we have to give up the certainty of, like, oh, if I do this, then it's going to become a vending machine. That's never going to happen.
Right.
But
Right.
it will, and there's a lot of evidence that shows that when you start to move forward in this, you get better results, as well as, a little bit of, I don't have to keep beating my head against the wall.
Which we can all use more of. So let's talk about that. I love what you just said. Let's click down one more level on some of this. So talking about the measurement, and we talked a little bit, you were talking a little bit about the tech stack that's involved. So first, there has been so much instrumentation been built around the more traditional model. And the instrumentation now is giving feedback into the practices, which are changing, which changes the instrumentation. So, we're not going to throw all that out, but what role do you see data and these automated systems playing in a complex, in a marketing approach that recognizes complex systems?
Well, I think we have to look at this, to your point, at a kind of a finer level. So first off, there's data, and then there's what do we do with the data?
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about the fact that there's, everything, the probability says, we have some things that we know and we have some things that we don't know. And what we're moving away from with the use of that data that we find out what we know is then to try to create a priori or rules-based ways of using that data. So attribution is an example. So the idea that we can set up, last touch, first touch, multi-touch, whatever, and then that's going to be predictive is worse than wrong. It's actually disinformation and leads us in a potentially and probably a bad way of doing things. When you are in a complex, a VUCA situation, you have to discover the way to go forward. You cannot predict the way to go forward. Now, having said that, marketing outcomes do have causes. And if you use the right kind of analytics, you do get to have some patterning that's done. In fact, AI is going to be awesome for this, already is. I mean, we already have systems that are pretty good at it, but
Yeah.
AI is going to be fantastic at being able to see not only the patterns, but the patterns that are more important to be able to tell us what persists as indicative of what might happen in the future. There's a lot of excitement, I think, around that in the intelligence world. But we have to get away from, this easy and cheap way that we think we're going forward with it and move to these better kinds of analytics. So, like you said, we're not going to throw the other thing away. Attribution actually gives some interesting information about, what are the things that customers do before they actually buy. That's good information to have. It's just not predictive in the kind of linear deterministic way that we try to use it in that way.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're definitely not throwing away the data. More. If you have another dollar, spend it on data. But the way that we use it, I think, needs to change. And the mindset about how to use it has to change.
So thinking about our planning and our strategy, kind of going back to PPT, people, process, and technology. We've been talking about process and technology. We touched a little bit on people, but this is almost a belief level system change in how you frame, at least in how you start, and the assumptions you do or don't make about the marketing machine, your marketing strategy. How do you see, how do you advise folks, and what do you have to say in the book about the way you structure your team and the kind of people, the kind of characteristics people have that you want fit into your team?
The people stuff is really cool. I mean, I actually, when I had the book edited, had to cut out so much people stuff because it was just overwhelming it because there's just so many neat things that are happening with the people. I would say the most important, well, there's a couple things, but the most important thing that I saw is that, when you want to be able to deal well with constant change and things that are going to pop up, you need to be agile. And so that we know there's a whole agile methodology that has to happen. And we know that from agile marketing, and there's a lot of cool stuff there.
Yeah.
But the other thing is that our silos that they're easy for us to manage, relatively easy for us to manage, but they prevent that agility. It isn't the hierarchical approach, which we're not going to get rid of entirely, but we are going to try to flatten it a little bit, actually, sometimes a lot. And we're going to try to move away from this functional, I am the marketing group, or even within marketing, we're the advertising group, we're the event group, and try to put that into teams that match with the customer job and integrate those teams, including in some cases sales and marketing or pieces of sales and marketing being integrated together. People are working towards this and getting some fantastic results. This does not mean take the whole marketing silo and shove it under sales and call the leadership a CRO. That's not the right way to do it, because that would be actually going backwards. But what you do want to do is try to create these integrated teams that can be agilely responsible for whatever the job is at the point of solving a piece of the customer's problem. And they're getting some fantastic results. And there's again quite a bit of information in the book about how to do that and how to think about that.
Well, that's great. That's great. Thank you, Kathleen. Well, also in the book, one of the things I love about it, one of the many things I love, is a suggested reading list too. So, all of the thought that you put into it and the advice that you've assembled, there's also further reading for the student of marketing and the continual improvement of marketing leadership and machine, which I found very. I think that's going to be super useful to folks as well. And so, but on that note of suggested reading, the best practices today, I'm sorry, tomorrow's best practices today audience is nothing if not a community. So we also like to talk a little bit to folks about the things that they're doing when they're not worrying about marketing and educating all of us and doing all this. So what's on your personal suggested reading list, Kathleen? What are you reading these days?
Well, I do have a big stack of things that I didn't get to. That's always kind of the shame of, it's like, oh, I wish I could have put that book into the list, but you have to stop somewhere. But I'm reading two books right now. I'm a big reader. One of them I'm really excited about. Actually, I have it right here next to me. I've only barely started it, but this is this one, Proto: How One Ancient Language Went Global. So I love books and I would recommend to people, if you want to be truly educated, is try to find books that combine a bunch of stuff together. And this one has archaeology and linguistics and genetics and about how the Proto-Indo-European language spread out over the years, over millennia, and became the dominant language structure of the world. So I'm doing that. That's one of my favorites, or I'm excited about reading it.
Some light reading. Good. Yeah.
Some light reading, right. But this is, and then my bedtime ritual, which I can't show you because it's on my ebook, but I'm reading a book called Table for Two by Amor Towles. And I don't know if anybody's familiar with Gentleman from Moscow. That was one of his big hits. Wonderful writer. And it's a kind of short stories. And that's my bedtime reading. So a little bit lighter.
That's great. You have to have something right at the end of the day, just to
I have to laugh
come in
because
for a landing.
On my Kindle, it says, oh, you've been reading for 365 days or whatever. And I'm like, no, I think I've been reading since I was 4 years old every night. So it just, but anyway, I love reading. And actually, I did want to mention that my the audio book for those of you, those people who are
Yeah.
busy, is coming out on September 23rd. So
Oh, that's amazing.
yeah,
Congratulations.
so I'm
Yeah.
excited. I'm
So,
excited about
of
that.
course, the book, Marketing in the Great Big Messy Real World. Kathleen Schaub, thank you so much for writing this book. Thank you for taking time to talk with us about some of the concepts in it and help ground it for us. Um, we're all smarter for it. Run out there, get the book, do the suggested reading, listen to it, and after September, if you don't have the time, like many of us don't. Kathleen, I just want to thank you so much for making the time and taking the time to talk with us today on the podcast.
It was a
Thanks so
pleasure,
much.
Clark. Thank you very much for having me.
Take care, everyone. Thanks very much.